the time so well, actually. We've now got a short while for questions or comments from the floor. Obviously, we need to give the speakers a chance to get to reply as well. So, can I just see, yeah, there's a gentleman there in the white shirt, a gentleman at the front here, and a gentleman at the back there. Actually, and then I'll go to that side.
Yeah, thank you. I welcome what Ken was saying about testing, because I think it's not only a question of having policies about structures, but I think also about what the content of education. But I think, as well as looking at that, there's also, in terms of pressure on teachers, stopping them from teaching creatively and well, is the role of Ofsted. And I wondered if the panel could say something about this. Because it seems to me that each framework that Ofsted has produced has been more and more punitive. And rather than trying to support teachers, its effect has been to inhibit them. So I just wondered what comments you had on that.
Sorry, there's a gentleman at the back. Yes.
Hello, mine was about something that somebody said about education, that there are two things, there's cuts and there's also the changes that are being implemented. And in health, at the moment it's sounding like it's all about funding in what you hear from the press, but there's the funding cuts, and then there's the plans that are being implemented to transform the NHS and bring in the United States ACO system, which is already happening at least one place in the north of the country, and is planned across the country. So they're two quite separate issues. It's good that we don't end up just asking for more funding and then getting more funding. The US is spends far more than the UK, but for completely the wrong things, which is what we're getting. And the one place we'll be able to pressure politically as citizens is councillors, because they have a say in the sustainability transformation plans, and they're accountable. So there's campaigns coming up, and people should try and find out about that so they can pressure the councillors not to go ahead with these plans.
Wasn't there a time when nurses actually did start on the ward and work on the ward? It seems to me that over the last 30 years of this counter-revolution that we lived through, more and more young people are being forced basically into universities, which were many of them were polytechnics, specifically, not necessarily to get a good education, but to get into debt, so that they'll keep quiet, basically. And so maybe going back on the ward wouldn't be such a bad thing. Perhaps you'd like to clarify that, please, Danielle.
Am I right in understanding, but this has been queried, that the Labour Party, as they said at the conference before last, is now committed to wind up grammar schools by the end of the next term of Labour government? The first question. And the second question is, does the speaker on the left know what Angela Rayner's attitude is to excessive testing of children?
Sorry, if you could say, very remiss of me, if you could say your name and who you're from, where you're from, but before you make your comment. Is there anyone over on this side? On my left? Anyone on my left? Yeah, so the lady, you mentioned to me right at the beginning, the lady with the blaster in the middle of the road there.
I'm wondering if you could be kind enough to address the point that I made earlier, which I can't remember because I have vascular damage from 2 strokes and short-term memory loss. You were saying something in your introduction about Labour were going to repeal something, and then I was asking about something else that Labour might be repealing, and then you said, ask the question at the end, but I can't remember what it was I was asking about. Sorry.
The Welfare Act.
Here from the Tories and the American version that they're in favour of young people who are from poorer backgrounds getting into grammar schools and being good in society. Well, if people realise what's going on, we know about the debts that they get into once they go into the education. Most people that go into further education live away from home, and in the society we live in today, where people are in social housing and renting accommodation, that means that the young person vacates a bedroom, and that leads to bedroom tax, and they come back possibly to an eviction. So that's the way people are going to education today.
Hello, I'm Desi, I'm from Hammersmith and Fulham, I'm here with my mum. I just want to make 2 points. I think with the healthcare, we need to be concerned about elder care, because as we've all said, some of us are carers and workers, so we need that support and you just miss out on it. Also, as an older worker, we now know that we've got to work longer. Well, my problem is I'm cared and cared for. I've been in social services now for 43 years. The last couple of years I've had to just do part-time. And what's happened is I think to myself, I just can't do this job anymore. And what's wrong is there is no further education help. They told me to go and learn to use a computer. So I went along and they said it would cost me £170. Well, I've missed work for 2 months because I was ill, and there isn't any other grant you can get. And also, can I please ask anyone who's campaigning for the NHS, please make sure that if we don't have hospitals, we do not get school nurses, speech therapists. Please let parents know this, because they don't realise that this comes directly from the NHS. Thank you.
Everyone goes from Milton Keynes. You talked about international students when we go around the universities. Research centers are losing a lot of international students, and that means they are losing money as well, because international students bring in a lot of, contribute towards the economy. What is there going to do about it?
Noel Hayes, United Union and Chingford Constituency Labour Party. In a world in which work becomes less and less available to people through automation and artificial intelligence, in a world in which the means of production are concentrated in fewer hands, often beyond the reach of the nation state, 2 things arise. What is the purpose of education? What are we going to train our young people for? And secondly, how are we going to pay for our health service?
Okay, thanks very much. I think in order to give the panel time to actually reply to the questions, we need to go back to them. I'll take people in reverse order that they spoke in, and hopefully they'll be able to address everyone's points. So first it's Shelley.
I'm going to start. I'm only going to answer a selection of them, because I think the community can get through all of them. But I'm going to start with the NHS one and the debt and complacency. So I think that was a real big factor in the government's reasoning behind cutting the NHS bursary, because I think because students were coming into education and receiving a bursary from the NHS, there was a bigger incentive for them to then go and work for the NHS. They felt their loyalty towards it, they felt like it was something that valued them while they were training. And now that that's been taken away, I think it plays into this agenda of moving more trained nurses and all education professionals into the private sector, towards the agencies and not into the NHS. And I think that's a big factor as well in the broader issue of debt, and how this government hopes that students will come out of the higher education factory automators that are just basically going to get a job so they can pay off their debt rather than actually questioning society. And I don't know, I think there's a really important point there basically. Grammar schools, I completely agree with what you said about Labour needs to not just oppose extending grammar schools, but actually make sure that when we formulate the government, we go back and we get rid of all the existing grammar schools. And I'm saying that as somebody who went to one. I was the only person in my year on free school meals. I remember begging my mum not to allow me to claim them in case people laughed at me. It's not a place where we see social justice or social mobility. It's a place of privilege, and it needs to go. We need well-funded state comprehensive schools in every community that's open to everybody, no matter what your background and what your family income. And that's, I hope, what Labour will take up. In terms of testing, I can't say what I think Angela Rayner's position on testing in schools is, but my position is that examination is discrimination. I don't think there should be any testing in schools whatsoever. I think that it encourages students to compete against each other rather than to learn at their own pace. I think it also encourages schools to, as we kind of heard, teach a very narrow curriculum. And I'm really concerned at the moment about how the arts is being taken out of school curriculums, how children are only really encouraged to study those subjects that inform the league tables. In terms of further education, I mean, we could talk all day about how many different cuts have taken place in further education. Cuts to ESOL, I think it is an incredibly racist, motivated cut. I talked about the college mergers, which is forcing different colleges in different regions to become one, closing down different sites. I think, again, it's going to completely streamline the amount of different courses that students have access to, and also a real threat to teachers' jobs. That person also mentioned how you were able to get job seekers allowance in the summer. Students nowadays at their university are not able to claim job seekers. In fact, I think it works on the basis that you move back home in the summer. But obviously, if you're mature, if you're estranged, if you've got caring responsibilities, moving back home, it just isn't an option, which means that students are really squeezed in the summer months. There are other issues around further education. I guess you asked about technical stuff. I hope that Labour comes up with a really good apprenticeship investment policy, and also fair pay for apprentices as well. We work with the National Society of Apprentices in NUS, and they earn just £3.30 an hour. They're expected to pay for everything, for their prescriptions, which is over twice as much as they get paid an hour. So I really think that's a key policy that we need to see in terms of investment in further education. Evictions, your question at the back, really speaks to me. When I was in my first year of university, I obviously had to move out of my family home. My mum was evicted. This was before the bedroom tax, of course. But this was because she couldn't keep up with her housing benefit payments. And living in Essex, where most of the social housing stock has been sold off, this is a real cause of evictions, gentrification of different areas. So again, I think this is something the Labour Party needs to prioritise in terms of building more council homes and giving councils the money to do that. International students, just to finish off with, you said that they bring a huge benefit to our economy. Not just that, they bring a huge social benefit, cultural benefit. I went to a university where over half of the students there were from overseas. Many of them my friends. They meant that I could share different ideas, learn from different cultures, different practices. So I hope the Labour Party will pledge to reverse the government's awful policy on deporting more international students, and also reverse their policy on the post-study visa, which the government cut, which means international students now cannot remain in the country for a year to 5 years to study afterwards. They just have to get on a plane and go home. Thanks very much.
Well, there are so many questions that it's impossible to answer them in the way they deserve. There is a major question which I think Labour has been answering wrongly for a long time, which has to do with what the purpose is of education. The easy answer has always been to do with well, it's about personal development, and it's about development in ways that assists economic development. And the last bit of that is looking increasingly difficult to maintain as an argument. It's not as if there are huge skills shortages in the British economy, which the school system is somehow failing to meet. as far as we can see, the opposite is true, that you get expansion at the, maybe what you might call the top end of the labour market, and then in Mac jobs, insecure, precarious work of various ill-paid sorts. That's expanding. What isn't expanding is the kind of imaginary sector that Tory ministers talk about, and still some Labour politicians do, which is a sector which requires well-qualified workers who can look forward to secure employment. That's not happening. In that situation, for Labour, the education question has to be an employment question as well. It has to be a labour market question, has to be a question of industrial policy. And unless the two things are brought together, which I think they are in the new thinking, then it is very difficult to answer satisfactorily the question, what is education for? You can push away all you like with education reform, but unless you're doing the other stuff as well, then that question of purpose, doesn't get answered. So education and employment policy, education and industrial policy need to go together, in my view. On other issues, just a quick list. Angela Rayner is the first Shadow Secretary of State or Secretary of State to speak out on the question of testing and what it's doing to teaching and learning in schools in England. And that seems to me something that needs kind of noticing, marking and welcoming. It's the beginning of a different kind of debate about what kind of primary education or secondary education we want. In relation to grammar schools, yes, I think Labour's done well to respond immediately to the proposals of Theresa May, which will leave her in an exposed and weak position. And Jeremy Corbyn is right in the House of Commons to point to the range of opposition to grammar schools, from cuddly old Michael Wilshaw right through to people who are kind of enthusiasts for the academy system. That doesn't mean that no other issues are relevant here. It doesn't mean that Labour stopped standing for the abolition of the grammar school sector. It means that there's an immediate issue that needs to be confronted, and I think it is being confronted quite forcefully. Finally, two more points. On FE, yes, that's the sector that for other people's children that politicians don't talk about much or talk about in very lazy ways. The Conservative government talks a lot about its apprenticeship policy. That's more reminiscent of YTS in the 1980s than of anything else. And that needs to be understood. It isn't an enormous expansion of a skilled sector. It's to do with no jobs, Mac jobs, temporary jobs, training that's got a name but not a real content, and all the other things that people with long memories will recall very easily. That's what we're back to. And it's important to distinguish that from the kind of policy towards FE and apprenticeship and skills that a Labour government would undertake. Lastly, on Ofsted. Ofsted is certainly a problem for teachers. There are many other agencies around, the regional schools commissioners, non-elected, appointed from the centre, who also concern themselves with the regimenting, regulation and monitoring of schools' capacity to reach targets which are artificial and without credible education content. There's a lot of dangerous animals in the regulation jungle, and teachers have to face them every day.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of questions. With the nursing one, I'm sure you'll clarify, but I find that when you study with nurses in a university as medical students, we do interprofessional education, so you learn with other disciplines, and that's really, really, really helpful for getting into the ward and actually providing an integrated system of care which is efficient as well as actually is good for patients. So I'm not sure what nurses feel about that. Obviously, it being a degree that was funded before, it didn't feel like you were paying to go to university as well. And on the grammar school issue, yeah, completely agree with what the others have said about that, and what I was saying about educational inequality from early on in your education affects your social mobility in terms of what you study at university, if you study at university, and what you end up doing. On the question about elderly care, yeah, I completely agree that the government will tell you they're spending more on the NHS, which is only below what is necessary for our growing population, and our increasingly elderly population, as we find medical advances are going so quickly, and everyone's living longer with multiple chronic conditions. Like 70% of people being treated in the NHS is a chronic condition. They'll receive medicine their entire life, which is expensive, of course. But when they say they're protecting the budget, they're not protecting the entire social care budget. The care system is completely messed up by the Tories. My mum cares for my dad, and she's ill herself, and they've had to go through systems of people coming and interrogating you about your finances to find out whether you're eligible for certain benefits, and then just to tell you after months that you're not anyway, and that you can't do things like sell your house because all the money will go straight to your person who's ill as their care. It's completely unfeasible to work at the same time as caring for someone, yet you receive no benefits. It's ridiculous. I think this comes under the whole umbrella of what people were talking about earlier, scapegoating people on benefits, etc., which hopefully we'll have with the new film, Ken Loach film coming out, and things like that, trying to change people's attitude on that, to realise that it's not nice to be under this system that people will claim is sort of great and money just handed to you. It's not like that. Yeah, I think that was everything else.
I'm just going to cover 3 points quickly. First of all, nurses going to university. I think absolutely we should go to university. I don't want to offend anyone when I say this, if you're a nurse, I'm sorry, but nursing has evolved over the years. Our job has changed, we have a lot more technical skill, we have a lot of knowledge, and actually nurses before should have had a degree. Everybody else in the hospital has a degree, and we deserve one too. If you look at the evidence, actually in degree educated nurses there's 7% less mortality, so it's absolutely key that we keep nurses in university, and that is why this nurse associate role that I was talking about is one of the worst ideas this government have had, and a risk to patient safety.
Absolutely.
The second point about further education and stuff, I came into nursing not through, like, I'm 29 and left school, I didn't have any A-levels, didn't really know what to do, and then one day I got a job as a carer. In about 2 minutes I was like, I'm going to be a nurse, that's it, my life changed. I went and did an access course, and that was the year before they hiked up the fees. So I paid £150, it's now £4.5 to do an access course. I got no help while I was doing my access course. I did a full-time course. I also worked in a care home nights and then went and studied in the day in order to go to university, and I think the Labour Party should be repelling all of that, and they will. I mean, we all deserve an education no matter what age we are. And thirdly, I'll talk about the Welfare Reform Act that the lady over there spoke about, and I think that's the act with the PIP, isn't it, the Personal Independence Payments. I don't know if any of you or people know about personal independence payments. They are disgusting. They are making disabled people who have been deemed by healthcare professionals like myself and a doctor saying that they're not fit to work. They then have to go and fill out a 35-page document and then be seen by somebody else who isn't even qualified to tell them 2/3 of the time that they're not entitled to money for mobility scooters, incontinence pads and things to help them with their daily life. This is disgusting. And John and Jeremy have stood by DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts. Like, please look them up and join in with the things that they do. And I would say, from me, like, I will always go to DPAC stuff, and I'm trying to raise awareness amongst healthcare professionals as well, because I think the way you get treated is heartbreaking, and I can't stand by and watch it happen, and we must stand against it. Thank you.